first question, obviously, the last time you were here, we were talking about, you got to be committed to the coverage. Is that the case again tonight?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, a lot of it is more us versus Dallas actions. I think last two games in particular, those are probably the most disappointed I've been just in our defense all year. And got to give credit to the group because there are some things we're doing really well. I mean, we're fourth in the league in pick and roll defense, which is great with the group we have. Fifth in DHO defense, so that's really promising. But then we're last in isolations, and we really saw that in the Washington game. It was 33 points we conceded off blow-bys, and it's we're doing a good job guarding early clock, but we have to make sure we're much more intentional with, number one, our off-ball gap positions, especially as the clock's as it's getting mid and late clock, the gaps become even more important. And I think that's very relevant for tonight, obviously, with Paige and Enrique, two very talented isolation players. So the drive defense is something that we have to improve on collectively, and I do think that's a difference between us being a playoff team and not. So, we had a really good kind of film session today and kind of just presented to the group, showed some of the numbers. And I think if we can, finish the season well with these 7 games, it's going to set us up in great foundation to improve our team defense next year. I think it's, if you have a top 5 pick and roll defense, normally you have a top 5 defense overall. But because we've been so poor in drives, rebounding, it's hurt our defense overall this year.
One quick question: what are you most proud of this team? Because I've watched probably 4 games over the last 3 days. How hard you play, and that's something that us old school guys like seeing.
Thank you very much.
What for you is most proud of?
Yeah, that's a big compliment, and I'm very proud to coach this group. I'm very grateful to be able to work with them every day because I think if you go around the league, I don't think there's many teams that play harder than us. And that was a kind of a big identity piece from day one of training camp where, we spoke about, all right, you hear this kind of phrase, play hard a lot, but let's really focus on tangibly. What does this mean? And what are the actions we're going to hold ourselves accountable to doing collectively, defensively and offensively? And I think that manifests itself in things like the full court pressure we see and just the relentless attitude to, regardless of the score, we're competing until the last moment. And I think I'm really pleased because this has kind of become our identity. And I think, when you think Portland Fire and, when we think about future off seasons and adding to this group, I think we've got a really good foundation now because of that identity. And I think, players know that if they come to Portland, this is how we do things here. This is the standard that we commit to. And, we want every team when they play us to be like, damn, this is the team that plays the hardest in the league. We're not going to get anything easy tonight.
Do you think what sort of set that tone is just the fact that all of these players, the ones that have been in the league, kind of came from a team where they kind of fell under, in the shadow, and this was kind of like their chance to shine and stand out, and then of course the rookies?
Yeah, I think I'm sure it's a little bit of that. I think what's even more important is then what we emphasize as a coaching staff, and I think it's for me, the big thing is rotations, right? If you're talking about playing with a lot of physical pressure and trying to wear the opponent down and be relentless and play hard, then for me, it's impossible to do that if you're not playing 10 players, number one. And then it's kind of what you're selecting to show them in film and how you design your practices. So I think that stuff's critical because if you're not very intentional doing those things, I think things slip through the cracks, especially when you don't practice. We had 2 practices this month. So you have to be so intentional with what you're saying in timeouts, film breaks to make sure that, your identity, your style of play is, holding true. And that's why I was disappointed just about the last 2. Definitely we played hard, but I think our defense slipped just in terms of that on-ball containment.
Good question.
Yeah.
I've heard you mention, just since you've been talking, you've mentioned a lot of statistics, but then you've also mentioned a certain mentality that you want your team to approach their games with. When it comes to a team like Dallas that's had to make a lot of changes, they've been experimenting with a lot of different lineups that you may not have a lot of film on. What's the most important aspect, like focusing on statistics and specific styles of defense, or do you want your team to approach it more focused on a certain mindset?
Yeah, it's always a blend of both. And, I think how we use analytics, it's kind of guiding our attention. It kind of directs our search for where to look, but it doesn't always tell you the how. So, prime example would be Dallas, second team in the league in transition offense, right? So yes, that tells you something, but then the why, that's where you got to go deeper as a coach and look at, all right, how are they getting out? What are they doing to, have a good transition volume and efficiency? And then what does that mean we need to be extra purposeful doing to limit that? So that's kind of how we go about all our game planning things. I think just something I've learned over the years, especially, having all the data that I've had available in different leagues, but then you have to decipher it, and you can't just rely on it and say, oh, they're second in the league. It's the why. And I think that's something we've kind of been very specific with the coaches all year on, to look at those whys and really break it down. But no, I think on the different lineup thing is definitely interesting, especially the three bigs. I think the metaphor I use with the team today is it's like a game of chicken. And you're going head on, you're driving full speed. We want to be the ones to force them to divert off course through personnel they're playing, what they're doing, through doubling down on our principles. And that's why I like keeping I'm always tinkering, experimenting, but that's why I like committing to our style of play, because I feel like we can double down on some things if we see that three big lineup. And it's, yes, there has some advantages in some areas, but then what can we do to counteract that and be purposeful to use the advantages we have, being smaller, maybe a little bit quicker, shooting the ball really well from three, etc.